be here. Excited to go through the portfolios. And as Kaylin said, I will be your facilitator for this evening, and I'm excited to be doing that. So a little bit about me and why I'm actually doing this and why I'm actually passionate about being involved tonight. With over, I would say, about 20 years of experience, Alona can keep me honest. I have been working in the UX and design industry, leading and developing complex solutions. So I have a deep experience in design thinking and digital strategies, which I use to connect the dots between business challenges and human-centered solutions across a range of technology platforms. So during my career, I've developed experience solutions for global and Canadian organizations looking for what I call impactful and meaningful outcomes, working with clients such as American Express globally, Sun Life Financial, Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board, Kids Help Phone, all impactful clients to me. And one of my go-to superpowers, people usually ask me, what's your go-to superpower? And what I say is design thinking. As a certified practitioner leading design thinking workshops, I believe the act of collaboration is critical. And so in my current role as Vice President of User Experience and Design for TWG, now a Deloitte business, I lead a bright and talented design team within a research, design, and data-driven environment. So I'm looking forward to learning more about and sharing the UX portfolios that we are presenting tonight. And so without further ado, I'm going to let each of the panelists actually introduce themselves. And first up is Erin. Erin, can you please introduce yourself?
Great, thanks, Marilyn. Hello, my name is Erin. I've been in the field of UX for about 15 years. For the past 2 years, I've been working as a design manager at ServiceNow. ServiceNow is an enterprise company, meaning that our customers are large and small companies that you might recognize. You know, there's big ones like Nike and Disney Plus, but also, you know, small and medium-sized companies as well as governments and universities. Prime example being the government of Canada. So it's a very interesting space, and I have a team of 7 designers and counting. We own a portfolio of products that are all about enabling the customers to build chatbots and conversational AI. And so it's we have like 2 different layers of users where we serve the people that are building the conversational interfaces. And so the goal of like our users being creating a successful chatbot that can automate a large portion of like help desk calls and tickets like emails and things like that. In my time here, I've grown my team from 2 to 7 designers, which required reviewing a lot of portfolios. And so I'm happy to share the perspective of a hiring manager with you today. Yeah, I went to Waterloo and U of T, and Torchi is my home, and so I'm happy to be back today. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. That was great. Thank you very much. Gordon, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. Gord Davison. So I've been a designer for 32 years, which sounds weird to say that out loud, but 8 years at a multimedia startup and 24 years at IBM in a variety of roles, from designer to design lead to design manager to now a studio lead and senior designer. And so IBM is an interesting case in point. We have over 2,000 formally trained designers in the company, which makes us the largest design firm in the world, I think, and 150,000 IBMers who have actually gotten at least a practitioner badge in design thinking. So there's a lot of skill and experience across the company. And so I've kind of been on the tip of the spear in terms of design thinking, going back to the old D School, Stanford D School days. And I've worked extensively with customers doing many design thinking workshops and engagements over the years, and I have the scars to prove it. It's interesting how things have really evolved even over the last 6 or 7 years that we've been using enterprise design thinking extensively, I think the practices have grown and evolved. We spun up a user research practice, which is fairly dramatically different than what we originally envisioned. So, and that's just a hallmark of design thinking and implementing in an agile environment. You have to grow and learn and change. So excited to be here tonight. I've probably screened 2,000 portfolios myself. And some of the things that I really value out of candidates that I hire are curiosity, enthusiasm, and humility. I think all three of those things in the right proportion often correlates with tremendously talented and excellent candidates. So that's my story. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gordon. That was great. I appreciate that. I completely agree with you on the design thinking and the curiosity. So I appreciate that. And next up, Aditi, please, if you can introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Marilyn. Hi, everybody. I'm Aditi, and I'm a UX researcher at Google. And I've been with Google for the last 4 years. And before that, I was actually getting my master's in information at U of T. So Professor Chignell actually reached out to say, can you join this panel and share some of your advice? Because, I remember being in your position as a student, preparing my own portfolio. And there's just so much I wish I had known back in my day when I was preparing that. So I'm really excited to, share what any of my lessons learned, as well as, now at Google, I do a lot of interviews for both not only UX researchers, but with UX designers. So, at Google being such a large company, one of the unique things is that they're very specialized roles. So you have UX designers, UX researchers, UX engineers, interaction designers, really unique roles for different UX functions, which could look different in smaller agencies or startups. So, but at the end of the day, when it comes to interviewing, there are some key things that we look at outside of just like your UX knowledge that I'm excited to share in this portfolio review. And then the other thing I will share, so. Before joining, iSchool and knowing that I wanted to get into UX, I was studying communication theory at Western. So I also resonate with, folks who might not come from the traditional UX background and thinking about, how do you not only just pivot, but how do you connect the dots between experiences that you might not obviously think connects with UX, but really drawing that the dots between, your own narrative and how the transferable skills that come along with you and make you unique. So I'm excited to be here and share what I can.
Thank you, Aditi. That was great. And I agree with you just in terms of the unique backgrounds and where we're all coming from, but we're all aiming for the same goal, which is, human-centered solutions, right? So thank you for that. And then last, we saved the best for last, is Damon. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Damon Pfaff, and I'm a service designer at University Health Network. I work for a team called Healthcare Human Factors, and I've been there for about 5 years. I think, my role focuses mainly on design research and co-design. So I do a lot of work that involves clinical shadowing and interviewing of patients who have lived experiences with different illnesses. And I think something that makes healthcare quite unique, perhaps, and maybe other people can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we work primarily with other people who don't have backgrounds in UX and design. So a lot of our role is about communication and translation to people who have clinical backgrounds or maybe have never heard any of the technical terms of our discipline before. And so that value of being able to communicate things in really simple language that a nurse or a patient could understand is really critical in our role.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introductions. Thank you very much for the introductions from all of our panelists. And so now let's get into it. Let's get into this conversation about portfolios, dive deeper. And I'm going to ask the panelists a list of questions around cooking up a solid UX portfolio. So let me start with the first question. And it's a good question, which is, what's the first thing you notice or what really grabs your attention when you look at a new portfolio and what stands out? So why don't we start with you, Erin?
Okay. So when the first thing I really that stands out is does this person have a relevant experience? Because typically, whether it's profile hiring or whether you're hiring for a specific position, you are looking for a specific skill set, and whether the person has the knowledge and experience in that area. And so do they have relevant projects? And I would first spend a couple minutes scanning the type of experiences they have. And that's what really stands out and grabs my attention. If they have worked on something similar type of product, whether it's enterprise or mobile or what have you, I think the organization has their need and really looking to fulfill that need in the candidate. And so that's the first thing that I look for.
Yeah, it actually goes back to Aditi's point around connecting the dots, being able to connect the dots between business needs and what is what's present, what really draws your attention to the portfolio. So on that, I'll hand it over to Aditi. What do you think? What's the first thing that you notice?
Yeah, I just wanted to plus one what Erin was sharing of the first thing when I come on someone's portfolio is seeing what their experience is. And particularly, I just want to know if you are a student that is clearly highlighted. So then I have my set of student criteria that I now evaluate your portfolio versus someone who's been out in industry and the expectations I have for that. And I think that also comes up specifically when I'm looking at your case studies of calling out, is this a class project or was this an extracurricular activity? Was it from an internship? Once again, really having that up at the top. So once again, I can set that context of, okay, when you're communicating, your thought process, what is the context? Are you working with team members? Are you working with classmates? And I think that just really helps me, understand, what I should be looking out for. And then also to be honest, I will spend no more than 2 minutes looking at a portfolio to decide whether we want to call you in for a phone call, which is usually the first step at Google when it comes to interviewing, and just getting that kind of gut check of okay, you have you're communicating UX foundations, we should bring you in and chat more. So so I definitely keep that in mind when you're building out your portfolio.
That's great, thank you. Gordon, do you want to add to that, please?
Sure, yeah. Same as what my fellow panelists said, but I would say even before I get into the depths of your portfolio, it's who are you? You form an impression before you start looking into the each of those projects, and it's a digital signature. It's an autograph of your style, what you value. And I think when you've looked through as many portfolios as probably all of us have, you form those opinions pretty quickly. And as Aditi said, if I'm screening 175 portfolios, I'm spending 1 to 2 minutes. So you have a limited amount of time to capture my attention. And I pick up on all the things. It's the visual design, the color, the layout, the composition, the white space. If I see any little inconsistencies right off the bat, that is a big red flag for me. So that's what stands out for me.
It's a great one. I love the themes and the consistency across the panelists. And Damon, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely agree with everything that's been said so far, but in interest of, saying something a little different, I think something that I always look for is, the organizational principles, that someone's thought about how I'm going to navigate that information, because the portfolio itself is a UX problem, right? It's a problem of how are you going to help me sort through a number of portfolios, but B, all of this information that you have to share with me. And so I really like to see that someone's thought about how the information is going to be chunked out so that I can find what I need in the amount of time that I need to find it.
Okay, my favorite quote so far for the night is the portfolio is a UX problem. I love that. And so just as a reminder, as we go through this, audience, you may send your questions into the chat and we'll try our best to get to them during the discussion. So please. And so I'm going to move on to the next question.
Marilyn, sorry, we did have a question in the chat.
Please jump in.
So Claudia asked if it's not seen as good to include class projects. So should we be including class projects, or is it better to leave those out of your portfolio as a student?
Yeah, who wants to tackle that one?
I can take that one, because I remember being in this position when I was preparing my portfolio of like, I totally understand that most of like your experience comes from your class projects. So I think it's like included, but the general takeaway that I have is just be very intentional with how many projects you put up and which ones you really want to showcase, that you feel like this is putting your best foot forward. And then I think just with the class project, when you are writing about it, knowing that when we look at student portfolios, we know like there are tons of class projects. So what is a unique perspective that you can provide that, as Gordon said, that showcases some of your personality, and how are you thinking about this problem space? Because I think that's the other thing that we're trying to grasp really early on, is like what not only unique perspective are you bringing, but how are you thinking through this problem that is like getting us to understand how you think through things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the expectations are different for a class project. And of course, when you're starting out, all your projects will be like school projects, right? So nothing bad about that. It's just that that needs to be highlighted so that we can adjust our expectations. Because if it's a real life project, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could get into, like how you work with the product and dev teams, how whether it launched and what kind of feedback you were getting, what kind of metrics you're collecting. And then based on that, how are you adjusting or making improvements on top of that? In a class academic bubble, I mean, those things are sort of secondary, but the capacity to kind of think through those considerations would be interesting. And so, yeah, again, I think just setting expectations for the audience would be important.
That's a good one. Yep. And I actually would like to add one point there. I know I'm facilitating, but this one jumps out at me. And I completely recommend that school projects are usually led in a group. I'm actually taking my master's in analytics right now with Schulich, and we're doing a group activity. And I think it's really important to highlight what role you played in this group activity. And it's okay to, for lack of a better description, toot your own horn, like really showcase this is the component that you narrowed in on and focused on. So please be specific on what role you played within that project is critical. Okay, I'm gonna move on unless there's any other questions in the chat. And it actually relates, which is what really differentiates a good portfolio from a great one. I'm going to start with Gordon. Gordon, tell us your.
Sure. I think an excellent portfolio has all the elements that you would expect. So it's very consistent. As Damon said, there's a good organizing principle. I always like to say design everywhere. I guess that's another way of saying it's a UX problem. Like everything about your portfolio should be intentional, should be designed. You should consider it from the experience of somebody who's reading it, who's consuming it. I would say that what distinguishes a truly excellent portfolio is, again, it's kind of that digital signature. So what is it that's uniquely about you? I see so many templates, of course, these days, and that's completely fine. Like you want to focus on the work, the quality of the work. But if you're purporting to be an interaction designer, then it's fine to have some interaction design patterns in there that are unique or different, as long as they work. And of course, design is about intent. It's purpose-driven. So, you should be able to evaluate how successful a portfolio is. And the truly excellent portfolios just do everything well. Good layout, good composition, the right amount of content per project, the right amount of projects. I've seen people's portfolios with like 20 projects. I'm done after 3. So only excellent work, consistent from top to bottom, just no weaknesses. And that takes refinement. It means getting feedback from people. It means continually refining and improving upon all aspects of your portfolio.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Gordon. That was great. Aditi, I'd love to hear your perspective on this in terms of what makes a good portfolio from a great portfolio, what differentiates them.
For sure. So I think there's this like meta theme of like, how are you communicating? What is the communication style, both through like the words that you're using, but as well like the visuals as Gordon shared. So I think that's like something that really strikes me. And I think the second thing, if I can add, is getting to know you outside of like a UX professional. Because yes, I understand a portfolio is about, you know, demonstrating your UX skills and how you think about it. But if you have other like notable leadership, you know, activities or extracurricular activities that can, you know, speak to like how would you show up as like a professional? Because, you know, when we do interviews at Google, like, yes, we have like a whole thing that we focus on, like, do you know the foundations, UX foundations, but we also want to understand collaboration. And that could come from, you know, it could be from like you being on a sports team or like running a certain, you know, like group or, you know, extracurricular activity. And also what you like, are you creative? And just kind of getting once again a sense of like, who are you that will stand out and make you unique? Because I think that's once again, like, you know, what you know, we've all mentioned is that we're seeing a ton of portfolios. So we're just like looking for that nugget that will make us be like, ooh, we're like interested and we want to talk to you more. So I think that's the other thing when you're thinking about like this as your UX project, like, you know, your audience is like recruiters, hiring managers. So like, what can you drop in your portfolio that can interest someone and make them feel like, hey, I really want to like talk to them and get to know them more.
I love that. That's great. And there's a follow-up question in the chat that we can just reconfirm. How many projects would you recommend an entry-level portfolio to have? And I heard Gordon, you mentioned 2 to 3.
Well, 3 is a good magic number. I would say, you know, I'm very definitive about this. Only your best work, period. Like, it's something that you're not an expert in and you've got a portfolio of 3 pieces, I don't want to see it. So if you've only got 1 great portfolio piece and that represents you well, I think that's fair. But yeah, 3, I think I kind of think of minimum 3 because that shows some breadth and depth typically.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would second that. And that's why it's so important to curate the right projects for your portfolio, right? You know, don't leave it to the hiring managers and recruiters to do the curation and find the right projects that are relevant. Put up stuff that are recent, that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. Ideally, a launched project or product that would be more interesting than the other ones. We don't want to sift through, you know, dozens.
That's
to
great.
Find which one.
Yeah. And I would kind of add that
Yes.
that idea of curation and distillation goes through like everything in your portfolio, right? It's easy to write a lot of text. It's very hard to write a very small amount of text, and that takes, you know, a lot of editing and getting feedback, as Gordon mentioned, to just kind of getting to that core set of things that will be interesting. And I often see in portfolios, you know, a lot of methods, right? Like people want to tell you every method they use. Like I made this map and then I made this map, but I often don't see a lot of the key learnings that came from using those methods. Like when you did this opportunity map or when you did this, you know, this service blueprint, like what did you learn and then how did you act on that? I think that's like something that I like seeing a lot.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Damon, I actually want to stay on you for this question that I see in the chat, which is UX research related. And I completely relate with this. And the question is, how can UX researchers make their portfolios stand out in their portfolio when their work isn't focused on visual design and prototyping?
That's really interesting.
That's
So,
great.
I mean, there's lots of really cool ways. I mean, there are people who make like videos and they film participants or friends of theirs, you know, saying things. Like, I think it really comes down to talking about themes that you observe and kind of like trying to give life to those through, you know, I think one of the portfolios we're going to review later, there's a good example of this where someone shows some quotes coming out of people's mouths. Or I saw one where someone made an Instagram profile for someone, and it's like, you don't have to make the same persona that everyone's making, because you can tick boxes of methods and make a persona. And as a person doing hiring, I'm not going to read word for word that persona and draw my own insights out of it. I need you to tell me, what I need to learn from this in a really short period of time. So to the extent that you can try and communicate visually without visual design, using images, using things that evoke emotion, and using quotes that are powerful, things that kind of draw me into that person's head.
Well said. Yeah, I echo that 100% plus. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question, which is, what are you looking to learn about a candidate through their portfolio? We've seen their pieces, we've seen the work that they execute, but what are we trying to learn as the human themselves, the candidate with that portfolio? Gordon, do we want to start? I feel like you have this at the tip of your tongue.
Yes, I think we're all bursting to answer these questions. Yeah, so what am I looking to learn? Again, I see that a portfolio is a real digital autograph of people, and you can certainly see a lot of stylistic choices that are being made. I'm a systematic person, so I value kind of structure and organization. So I tend to be very attuned to the information architecture and how the information flows. And I was chuckling when Damon was talking about people putting in, hey, look, I did a empathy map. I did a as is scenario. It's like, yeah, well, we want to know what the insights out of that are, not that you perform these activities. So I like when I'm looking through somebody's portfolio, I'm looking for concision. It's, again, as Damon was saying, I would have written you a shorter note, but I didn't have the time. You got to edit and re-edit because it's really got to be concise. It's got to be very to the point. So those are some of the things I'm looking for. Skills, obviously, for attention to detail. Again, kind of structurally, if everything flows together, they've got the right kind of projects. Like sometimes, they're applying to a job and their portfolio. I prefer the a la carte approach, and that was a question in the comments. Is that we're saying 3. Well, curated. Like I really believe that you should, if you're applying for a particular job, you can create a special version of your portfolio that showcases only the things that are relevant to that job. No hiring manager wants to go through anything more than they have to when you're screening potentially dozens or hundreds of candidates. So again, I'm always looking for a fit. It's the skills, it's the values, and you can see what people care about by the way they write about things, the way they describe things. So those are some of the things that I'm looking to get when I'm reviewing a portfolio.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Gordon. Erin, any thoughts on what you're looking to learn about a candidate through their portfolio?
Yeah, the portfolio is really to get you through the door, right? Like, do I want to speak to this person to learn more about them? Do the projects look interesting to me and relevant to the projects that we work on? Those are the types of things. And so I would try to express who you are as a person, talk about the challenges in a project, talk about the lengths you went to learn about the user problem or the unique way you tackle the solution, like unique way you organize information or communicated with other people. Yeah, things that are interesting to me are really about how they interacted and worked with other collaborators, whether there were PMs involved, engineers, content design or research. What did that entail? What did it look like? Those are, things that are particularly interesting to me.
That's great. Thank you. So we've been talking about all of the positives and what to look out for and what's good and what's great. Are there any red flags? If you were to give one red flag, don't do this, one thing, what's a faux pas? I'd love to hear from each of the panelists what that one thing not to add or do to your portfolio. Aditi, I'd love to hear.
For sure. And I can give a perspective from like if you are branding yourself as a UX researcher, being very careful with calling yourself a mixed method UX researcher, because I think sometimes there's an assumption as a UX researcher you need to be able to do like quantitative research as well as qualitative and really be great at everything. But just know that when you come to an interview, we will, if you're branding yourself as a mixed method researcher, we then expect you to be able to speak in depth about this, and it's very clear early on whether what your handle is on each of these methods. And I think that's another takeaway that I have, and I know this is I think you have to like take a moment and realize like what kind of companies do you want to apply to and what are they looking for. So just building on, like, I really like Damon's metaphor of like, this is your UX like project. So if you're applying to a startup, they're looking for UX generalists that can do everything, and the kind of skills that they're looking for is like doing research, designing, prototyping, versus if you're applying to a really big company like Google or Facebook, knowing that they have very specialized roles, you will have to curate your portfolio for that, versus saying that, hey, once again, I'm like, these are all the skills that I can do, but know that when you come onto the interview, we would be expecting you to talk like in depth about if you were doing prototyping, like talk to us about how you went through that. Or if you are saying you're adding UX research as part of your skill set, how do you think about that? So so I think just be cautious with how what foot you want to put in, or like how you want to brand yourself, knowing that you'll be expected to go into depth about into that.
Yeah, I feel like Damon, you have a lot to say on this one. Please.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I have a lot. I'll try to be concise because I want to follow my own advice. But I think like from a research perspective, something that stands out as a red flag for me is when people don't communicate about their research questions and how they maybe developed interview guides or developed how they were going to go into the field and collect the information that they collected. People will often say, I interviewed 25 participants, like they love to share the number of, like I interviewed all these people, or I surveyed this many people, but often don't talk about like how they created that survey instrument, or how they, how they created the interview guides, or how they planned to shadow, and what it was that they, like how they, you know what I mean? Like how they chose to focus themselves when they were in the field. So it's nice to me to see that there's, someone who like has those dots, but also connected the dots really clearly, so I can see how they thought about, actually going into the field and collecting that information.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to jump to a couple of really heated, hot topics before we have to move into the actual portfolio review. This question, I think, is quite interesting. Do you have any tips for using non-professional experiences in a portfolio, and particularly for students who have little to no UX work experience? Gordon, I feel like you have all the answers for this one.
Probably not, but I'll give it my best shot. Yeah, non-professional experience. I would say design is about storytelling, and you can cultivate stories. You can tell a story that is not a UX or a visual design story. I've done a lot of service design engagements, or designing things that have absolutely nothing to do with apps or user interfaces. You can design a better end-to-end experience. So I would say, and I think it kind of came up earlier about school projects only. Well, I highly encourage people to participate in hackathons, because they also get the experience of working with other disciplines, which is absolutely critical. I think cross-disciplinary collaboration is a highly underrated attribute. Being able to speak the same language as a developer, a product manager, marketing person, whatever. So I would say look for those types of opportunities, and look for opportunities to tell stories of design. Again, design it's purpose-driven. So if there's a purpose, then you can measure how successful it is. So apply design to everything you do in your life, frankly. So you can look for those types of experiences and tell a compelling end-to-end story about a particular user who this is helping, and look for every opportunity you can to kind of get involved in elements of design. I've seen all kinds of social and social initiatives these days about climate change and about social justice, and even COVID, workplace 2.0. So there's lots of opportunities out there if you want to.
Okay.
And just apply all the same design principles you would to any of these types of things.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Panelists, anything else to add to that one? I'm just looking at time.
If I could jump in on that
Yes,
one.
please.
So I think, one thing that's challenging about being a student is that you're often not making the thing real. And so you often don't have to make these like trade-off decisions about, we can only implement 2 features, which are the 2 most important features, or you're also not creating kind of like KPIs and trying to evaluate and implement the work that you do. But I don't think that you can still plan for that. And maybe you do that after the course, you can come up with a plan for like, what would I do if I had, 4 months to work on this project and a budget? Because that's a question that I always like to ask people, like knowing that their schoolwork was very constrained in time, was constrained in resources, couldn't be real. Like what would you do next? And what are the things that you would change? And really thinking that through, I think helps us understand what you would do in a real workplace.
Great, thank you. Just looking at time, Kaylin, do we have time for one more question, or do we want to get into the portfolio reviews?
I think it would be good to get into the portfolio reviews now. If that's
Let's get into it. I'm going to hand it back
Great.
over to you.
Yeah, so for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning when I introduced this, essentially we'll be going over 3 different portfolios, maybe 4 if there's time. And our panelists are just going to give their feedback with Marilyn, again, facilitating. So the first portfolio that we're going to be looking at is Victor's. Victor is a UX designer based in Mexico City. And I guess one upside to everything being online right now is that we can have guests from all over the world. And I think we'll have Gord start us off with his feedback if he's okay with that.
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, for all of the designers who are getting feedback on your portfolios, so salutations to you, because that is an important part of being a designer. You have to have a thick skin and you have to be able to accept feedback. So yes, good for all of you. So initial impressions, great use of white space. I love the kind of relaxed layout. It's a flexible design, so it's kind of using the whole screen space. I like the way the projects are aligned. The idea that you can drill down, so there's good progressive disclosure. And then maybe if we can go into one project. First one is great, yeah. And same thing. So I think, again, good relaxed composition. I love this part, the U-book. So this is a huge red flag for me. I always want to know who did what on a project. I see far too much of that. You never want to claim credit for something that somebody else has done. So you described your role, tools is relevant, duration is important, solo project. And again, from my perspective, very systematic. So design challenge, the business problem, you're kind of tackling it a little bit at a time. Good typography, it's somewhat large, but you have some subheads, which is good. Nice use of illustrations. I like the professor and student viewpoint. And this is a really important skill, the notion of kind of distilling, like sometimes I see way too much in user interviews. I don't want to see what every single person. So you want to fairly represent that. On the other hand, you want to be careful not to misrepresent that by having one testimonial. As I jokingly say, the plural of anecdote is not data. So you want to make sure that you fairly represent that. And I think you've used bolding to highlight. So really good visual design there.
It's great.
So we can
Thank
scroll down a little bit more. Shall I hand it off to someone else, Marilyn?
Yeah, I was thinking, Erin, any first impressions or any other details you'd like to add to that? If you don't mind.
Yeah, I think this was a solo project, but like highlighting your role is great, but who else was involved? That's what's kind of going through my mind. I also like the visual design and layout and the conversational content. So that like the header and the body text, they're easy to read and easy to follow. I think this person is a good storyteller. And on the previous page, I liked how you could see visually the projects that were in this portfolio, and most of them, if not all of them, had like mobile screens. So I can tell this person is a mobile focused designer. If I was hiring for a mobile design team, I would definitely be very interested. Yeah,
I really appreciate the consistent narrative around the storytelling, and only because it really relates to, again, even to the non-professional experience that we're bringing to the table. So the storytelling is very important and needs to be intentional. And I see that and I hear that narrative, which is great. Any other thoughts on this portfolio?
I just wanted to jump in. So what I actually liked was on the about page, how this person was calling out that they were coming from a computer science background, and I think that, and like just connecting the dots of like, oh, this is how I like got interested in UX. Something I know we mentioned early on is we just want to get to know you and what your story is, where are you coming from, and just connecting those dots, and especially highlighting something like computer science. And this is applicable to, I think, any function, is like, then we know that, hey, if we're hiring a role, you'll be able to speak some of this language, or even if you come from like a marketing background, or, really help us draw those connections. And like, hey, I have these transferable skill sets from this previous experience that makes me, this very unique UX professional. So I really like that.
100%, Aditi. I'm so glad you mentioned that about connecting the dots and really being able to tell, be able to describe your story and who you are really coming through in the portfolio. I 100% agree. Okay, team, do you want to move to the next portfolio?
Yeah, for sure.
Caitlin?
So as Anthony draws up the next one, the next one's from Faraz, who's a product designer in the making, currently attending U of T. So Anthony will just pull that up, and then we'll get started on that one. Oh, and if Erin would like to start us off with her feedback once it's up on the screen.
Sure. So one thing that I noticed about this portfolio right off the bat is it's in a Google Slides format or PDF. So it's a little bit different than the typical format that you might expect with a portfolio. And so as a reviewer going through this portfolio, I'm wondering how many projects there are, like how much do I have to scroll here? And because this is a very linear format, I don't know that right off the bat. And so it would be great to have some kind of an overview to start with, so that I get a sense of what types of projects that this person is about to show me. So should I scroll further down or not? I can decide right off the bat. I noticed a little bit of like what we spoke about earlier of designer kind of going through the motion of doing different kinds of analysis and research. But I want this person to think about, for example, hierarchical task analysis. That's great that you did that. But then I'd be interested in knowing whether this person just went through the motion of doing these things, or were they able to kind of zoom out and think about the project goals and how each of these things are benefiting the outcome of the project. What did you learn, and how did it then how did you apply it to the next step? I also had some questions around the design itself, but I'll pause there for others to chime in.
Yeah, Damon, did you want to add your initial impressions on this one? Any thoughts? Did we lose Damon? Okay, let's go with Aditi. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, similar to what Erin was sharing, I think what would be helpful, like at the top of this portfolio, just like laying out how many projects that you have in it. And I think generally with portfolios, and this is applicable to whether you're making a slide deck or or a website, is having a kind of summary of like, what are the different things you're going to talk? Are you talking about research, prototyping, like just getting a sense of like, okay, how long is this one case study that you're talking about? What are you talking? And so having that kind of like summary at the top, once again, knowing now that, someone is spending no more than like a minute or two, how do you just get that right there? And I think the other feedback that I would have to like really, take this to the next level is if we go to like the usability section area, use the title to like just call out what the usability issue is. So I think something when it comes to, like information hierarchy, like how can you use the like title space to like, just call out what the main takeaway is so that maybe like, the person who's skimming through this can like just get the gist of, what you're talking about versus having to like rely on reading the details. But I also do like the use of like, visuals over here to complement, the writing. I think that is always powerful. And last but not least, I think this is something that, is applicable to any portfolio is show and not only tell like, show, don't tell how you like applied this. So I think we really want to look for the application of like, if you found this usability issue, like help us connect the dots of like, did you iterate on it like upfront? Or if you are doing like affinity diagramming, like what were the key themes that came out and like, why were they the ones that really stood out to you? How did you use that information? Not just telling us that, hey, we did X, Y, or Z. It's like, I did X and that helped me do, Y. So I think once again, really calling out that application of, whatever task that you're doing.
That's great. Thank you. Gordon, Damon, are you back?
Yeah, I was dropped out of the call, but I'm back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even
No.
notice. Okay.
So yeah, because I missed a minute at risk of repeating things that have already been said. Yeah, I think for me that the biggest thing is around, again, like an easy way to navigate. I think Erin mentioned that the slide format, makes it hard to find the information you're looking for. And then the other thing that maybe would be a bit of a red flag, like kind of going back to that question, is I would wonder, does this person know design software? Or would they be capable of using Figma if I needed them to use Figma and stuff like that? Because there's a bit of expectation that with being able to create those formats, also working in that software is important.
Yeah, I think this is all great feedback, and that's why we're here. We're here to help and support and make sure that you're set up for success. So actually, I'd love to hear any thoughts from you, Gordon, just that kind of 360 review for this portfolio to help help out and make sure that we're giving them all the feedback they need to make this like ideal.
Yes, I'll be concise. So agree with everything my colleague said. I would almost be blunt and say a web page is kind of the minimum expectation, because you lose a lot in terms of navigation for hiring managers who don't have a lot of time having to scroll through a long vertical scrolling list and not really sure where the things are. So yeah, I agree with my colleagues. Be really concise. Use techniques like instead of prototyping, like call out the specific insights that you've gained, and use things like callouts, which are good. I would just say visual design is a little inconsistent. Like wasn't quite rule of thirds. There was some centered text. There was some left justified text. So just really go through with a fine-tooth comb and really be consistent with your headers, your footers, your spacing and everything else. But I saw good content, so it's just a matter of packaging that up into a really polished package.
Thank you, Gordon, for kind of summarizing that for us. Appreciate it. Kaylin, do you want to go to the next portfolio, please?
Okay, so the third portfolio that we have is from Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a UX designer based in Toronto. And for this one, we'll have Aditi start us off.
For sure. So I think the first thing that, stands out is a really like clean design. I'm a huge, like, I know I'm biased towards like dark mode websites. So I always love, the black and white. I think it's just like really, really stands out. And I think it's immediately based on that visual design. I'm like, I want to learn more. And actually for this portfolio, I think there was like a Starbucks case study, if we could pull that up. That was really great, like storytelling. I think, at the start, having that, context on the right of like, oh, because like, as we learned, this was a solo project, why you were interested in that, just like overall, like really, strong storytelling. I can tell like, early on, getting a sense of how you're thinking through things and how you're communicating that. And as we scroll down, the great usage of like, yeah, I really like this index section of like, okay, what are the things that I expect to see here? Giving me a sense of like, hey, I can scan this in like 30 seconds. And then also the last thing I'll say, just good usage of like the headings of like, hey, posing a question, or this is how, this is what the takeaway was. So overall was, it got me interested, which I think is the key thing that, you want someone who's looking at your portfolio to like engage in wanting to learn more. But I'll pause there and let the other panelists share.
Yeah, and I love the point. It really does stand out to me too. And we talked about that. Like, how does it stand out from the rest? And I found just the illustrations and the combination of the colors really, really did help. So Erin, did you want to continue on that in terms of initial impressions?
Yeah, I also like the how it's formatted. I might point out a couple of like polish issues like alignment and things like that. But it was kind of easy to follow. I like the index as well, although I would have expected the items in the index to be clickable, so I can kind of scroll to that, the sections that are called out. One thing I noticed was that in the first project, I think this one is a little bit better, but the first one had like thumbnails of some of the research activities and outcome that this person has done that I couldn't zoom into and like look at in more detail. So if you're highlighting those activities, make it available so that your readers can zoom in and actually see what you've done, instead of just saying that you've done these things. Yeah, I think I would have want to learn more about how they went about deciding like who the users are. There's kind of like this profile of like young mom and etc. But how did you make those decisions? And how did you come to the personas? Were they provisional? Were they based on data? If so, how did you collect them?
Yeah, actually, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I'm done.
Okay, just on that research topic, I'd love to get Damon's perspective from a research perspective, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It was, probably the only explicitly research-oriented project, and it really drew me in immediately. I would say one thing, and I'm saying this because I think the project was very good to begin with, is like try not to pigeonhole yourself into only functional insights, like what does this do for people functionally, but also consider like how it makes them feel, like what stories they told you about it, how would they perceive Starbucks moving into this territory? Is this a place that a big American business should be moving? And what do people think of that? So that's like an area that I feel like this project could kind of go to the next level. Just considering the meaning of them moving into the bubble tea space, is that a space that they belong, and how do people feel about that, was the question that I had.
Thank you. Those are great points.
Oh, sorry. And if I can just jump in with one more thing.
Yes.
There was one thing that I noticed when I was reading this, just like look out for like the ways that you minimize your accomplishments in the language you use. Like I think it said that it was a small side project or something like that. And I thought that this was a really great project. And I was like, why are you, making it sound like this isn't a big deal, like it's good work, and you did that all on your own, and you came up with that problem all on your own. You don't have to make it sound like it's not important. Yeah, like a solo the side project felt kind of minimizing to me, and I was like, you should be proud of your accomplishment. It's a good project.
I agree 100%. Gordon, would you like to add to that?
Sure, I can't contribute much more than what my colleagues have already said. Agreed, there was a few polished things, some really good storytelling. I love the use of questions, rhetorical or otherwise, as a framing device. That's a really good storytelling technique. Yeah, the comment about very large screen caps of activities. One thing you can do is use callouts over top of that. Like, that's a good example. So you can say, here's the activity that I performed, here's a screen cap from it, but it can't just be a picture of that. It's got to have some insights out of it. But yeah, I thought it was very inviting. Aside from a few little polished things, I thought it really flowed well. Good narrative structure, and the projects looked pretty uniformly high quality.
Thank you. So I believe that brings us to the end of the portfolios.
Sorry,
Is
Marilyn.
there one more?
We actually have one more, just in case we had time. So
Absolutely,
we
let's
do
do
have
it.
one final one. This is from Yara, who is a user and interface experience designer living in Toronto right now. And I think we'll have Damon start us off for this last one.
Okay, yeah, I really liked, the use of white space. It was very clear and easy to navigate through. One thing that I really enjoyed was I think the project that I read most in depth into had a video with it, and the video was really great. It kind of gave me a sense of, your communication style, how you present yourself, like your tone and your personality really came through in that. And I really encourage people to do that kind of multimedia stuff if that's available to them. Yeah, I think that the project was very interesting. If I could give one piece of feedback, it would be kind of explaining, how you made the decisions about where things should be on the screen and how people flow through them. I felt like that was a little bit glossed over, like what the actual interactions were and how the screens were laid out. There wasn't so much detail there. The detail tended to be upfront, kind of convincing me that the project was a good project and that it had a value proposition, but then trailed off a little bit in terms of how those decisions were made to actually execute the graphic design.
Great, thank you. Aditi, any thoughts or initial impressions on this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say very clean in terms of like how it was organized. As UX professionals, we always tend to be, more visual, and that's no surprise. Like seeing some of these artifacts. I think the only piece of feedback that I have to take this to the next level is, harping on this theme that I mentioned, is like your headings for these different sections. Like, how can you like up level how you were applying like user testing? Like, what did this user testing lead to? Or like, was there a specific insight to like lead with that? Because, once again, just like, really calling out this point of we have limited time. So I really just want to get a sense of like quickly, like, how did you apply this? Like, why did you put it into like grayscale before you like moved into like color and typography, like getting a sense of what your process is. So once again, we can get a sense of like, how did you think about this? And like, if you choose to do like this specific activity out of like, all the different things you can do, like calling that out like up front. Once again, and I think I put this in the chat, but I'll call this out, like a great, activity to do is like have your classmates look at your portfolio for 30 seconds and like ask them, what did they take away from that? And just, do some of like, apply your UX skills to your portfolio, do some of that user testing yourself and see that, hey, are the key things that need to be resonating with folks who are seeing your portfolio.
It's great, thank you. Gordon, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, really good work. Just a little too much detail for me. Again, you drill down into some really meaningful stuff, but you need to consider it's kind of the larger narrative arc of the project. And just as Aditi was saying, you need to kind of distill the insights that you get at every stage. Like, you should have almost a high level, here's the different stages of the project, and here's what I learned that drove me to the next thing. And I got stuck in the weeds a little bit with a lot of, again, showing a lot of the grayscale, which is, it's all great work, but it's just it's a little too much detail. You really need to focus a bit higher level. But that's often how we go through these projects, right? You get everything out there and then you just continually iterate and refine until you've got it down, to a science. And this is where getting feedback from peers is critical, because they will often ask those questions that will, help you refine that.
Great. And Erin, did you cover this one? I just want to make sure we have all perspectives.
Yeah, I liked it visually as well, and I like the storytelling. What was interesting was that this person had like links to the actual prototypes, which was cool to be able to actually see what was designed. What was missing for me was, at the end of the project, kind of the so what of that. So it's like you went through user testing, iterated, and this was the prototype. And then what happened? Like that was what was missing for me. Did it get developed, or what kind of results was this getting? What are some next steps? That's what I'm curious about.
Thank you. I'd like to add a couple to this one. Actually, this one stood out for me too, in addition to the research portfolio that we talked about. Damon, you summarized it so nicely. I couldn't have done it better. But for me, this one, I found that I really appreciated the storytelling aspect, starting with the how might we statement, because I'm a big believer of design thinking. So I could see that narrative was thoughtful and intentional. I actually appreciated the color palette and a bit of the grayscale, because it led me to believe that this individual could expand into potentially design systems and accessibility. One of the things that I felt a little bit lacking across the board, just in terms of being mindful of when we're developing these types of platforms, we're thinking accessibility first. So this one made me feel that you can lend yourself into those areas that once you go into execution, deeper into projects, they're capable of executing on those levels. So I really appreciated this one. So thank you.
Can I actually jump in a little bit on that?
Please.
Yeah. So I think, that thing about accessibility just triggered something in my mind that, working in healthcare, maybe it's a bit about the healthcare lens, but we're often very concerned about risk. Like how could someone be harmed by this? How could something go wrong? And I think that's something I often don't see in student portfolios is a consideration of the risks, like when we're talking about a social media network for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, like, could these meetups, be dangerous? Like, how do you report things that show up on that social media network? And kind of thinking through those things are really helpful for me to understand how someone might do in a healthcare setting where we have to be really self-reflective of whether our products are making people's lives better or worse. I think there's a temptation when you're a student to see how great this thing is that you made. And one thing that can be really good for us when we're hiring is to see that you know how to think through how it might go wrong as well.
Plus, Damon, I echo that. Yes. That's great. Okay, I think we were able to cover all 4 of them. We are sailing this evening. That's great.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll move into the audience Q&A now. And we're just monitoring the chat. And the first question comes from Hannah Fletcher. And she asks, would you recommend putting an overview for the initial glance at the project and outcomes, and then drilling down into details later, or just cut the specifics because they're too in-depth?
Who would like to tackle this one? Panelists.
I think it's a balancing act. It should be concise, right, and easy to follow. The storytelling is really important because that's what we do as designers. It should explain the nuances of the project and how you tackle those and how you solve them with the team members involved. And so whether you put the overview at the top or not, that's your decision in terms of how you want to tell your story. But the way you structure it and how it flows, that's what's really important. And I would encourage you to kind of think about it from the hiring person's perspective of like, do they have what it takes? You know, that's what we're looking for. And so kind of being able to convey that in a short amount of time, and for those interested, you know, getting kind of deeper into your project, that's what I would recommend. I don't know if that made any sense.
I can add to that. So I think a rule that actually I'm trying to apply as I am trying to refresh my own portfolio is, I think Gordon mentioned this, like 3 feels like a very magic number. So if you have a section, I'm like, what are 3 things you would want someone to take away from this section? You can apply it at like the case study level, and you can also apply it for each one of your sections, or even like the one thing you want to take away. You're showing affinity diagramming, you know, what's the one thing you want like a recruiter or hiring manager to take away about that, and be succinct. And then the second thing I'll add is like I think the second or third portfolio that we saw is like having that index section at the top of just like calling out what are the activities and things you're speaking about, so that, you know, whoever is reading has a sense of like, okay, really quickly get a sense of like, what are the things you're going to talk about, and then we can dig into that.
Yay, structure. Yes, I'm all over that. Yeah, I think having an overview. There's also another storytelling technique that is 3 parts. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. It's really important to have a strong conclusion. Like, what are the insights you gained? Again, this is design. Like, we have to be doing something that's purposeful, that is measurable. So yeah, and in terms of the amount of stuff, look into the mind of the hiring manager. That is who you're appealing to. So you have to understand what us hiring managers care about. So we want to get as much information in as little space as possible. That's kind of it.
Okay, did anyone have anything else to add? Damon, did you want to speak to this, or should I move on to the next one?
No, I mean, I think I just agree with what everybody said. Yeah, I like the thing that I would just underline is, you know, like start really strong and finish really strong. Like, you definitely don't want to end with something that falls flat at the end and doesn't have a conclusion, because that feeling is the feeling that we're left with about your portfolio and you and your work, because we don't know you yet. So, yeah, making sure to just have that punchy conclusion at the end that drives home that this project made some sort of impact, or that you learned something important, is critical.
Great. Yeah, those are all great points. So the next question is coming from someone who is in industrial engineering, but recently became really interested in UX design. And they're a little bit worried that their background isn't as competitive as those who have done UI, UX throughout. So this is more a skill question on how they can sharpen their UX design and research skills outside of school, and how they can apply their engineering skills, for example, data analysis, to UX, and if there's a need for those skills in UX as well.
If I can maybe jump in, like there certainly is where I work, and our team has many people who studied industrial engineering at U of T, and yeah, I think that those things are really linked together. If you are interested in UX, though, it is really important to, you know, explore prototyping and explore those kind of those visual skills that'll help you to communicate those things that you've learned about, because it's like, it's very important to turn those principles that you learn in industrial design and industrial engineering into, you know, actionable things and things you can share and communicate with a team of designers. For me, kind of communication is everything, and the more you can get good at visual communication, the easier it'll be to integrate into a team of people with disparate backgrounds and kind of like have them really understand you quickly. So that would be my advice.
Yep, as always, agree with that. I would just say that if you're getting into a new field that you're not familiar with, don't be a hobbyist, be a pro. You know, I have user experience designers who come in and they want to dabble in user research. I don't want people to dabble in user research because they don't understand confirmation bias, or they ask leading questions, or they don't know how to construct an experiment or a survey. So there's plenty of resources out there. So I would say commit to it if you want to. And these days, you know, there's kind of the notion of a full stack designer, right? And it's difficult. Like, I think it's you really want to focus on what you're skillful at. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none. But I'm teaching at the in the iSchool, and there's a bunch of students that come from a variety of backgrounds. Some don't have really any visual design and UX design experience, but they're working at it and giving feedback and direction. So you can, if you work at it and you practice your craft and you get that feedback, you can definitely become a professional.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
to
can.
add,
Yeah. Please go ahead, Erin, please.
no, I just wanted to make a point that UX is probably one of the most diverse domain where people come in from all kinds of backgrounds: engineering, graphic design, sociology, like different backgrounds. So I wouldn't shy away from applying yourself and really kind of trying to document your thought process and your approach, so you can convey your style as a designer. And you know, that's how you get experience, right? If you don't have experience. So I wouldn't shy away from creating a portfolio and getting your first experience.
And I also wanted to share, it's like, I went to iSchool, and I feel like when I first started, I definitely had that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like everyone knows like so much more than I do. But I kind of was working backwards of like, okay, I knew that, when I graduated, I want to work as like a UX designer at that point in time. I didn't know, like I enjoyed UX research the most. So if I needed to get a full-time job, that means I have to get experience. I have to get an internship. But like before I get an internship, I like have to like get some sort of experience I can even speak to when applying for that internship. So I think Gordon actually mentioned that like hackathons are a great way. I remember that first semester that I joined iSchool, and like continuing for like those 2 years, I tried to sign up for any extracurricular activity I could, try to recruit a team, with engineers or, other UX people who want to work with like visual design, so that I could, test out like my UX research skills. And it's like, a weekend commitment. And I think those were really powerful in just like getting your hands dirty outside of the classroom. That now gives me a case study that I can include in my portfolio and gives me something meaty to talk to, both in your portfolio, but also when you come to the interview of like, how did you work in this like 24-hour jam to decide what you need to work on? So I highly encourage to find those opportunities for yourself, or even like create that for yourself, which speaks to some of these other qualities we look for in candidates, is like leadership. You like took the lead to like organize this group and speak to that, which can be really powerful.
Oh my gosh, you're echoing so much of what I'm feeling when you're explaining that. And I just want to double down on the hackathon extra activity that goes such a long way. There's so many organizations that are building these hackathons where you're meeting and greeting and learning from others. But I wanted to just double down on the skill set in terms of data analytics. I think, do not underestimate yourself. I think that is where the industry is going. I believe that we continue to use data, both qualitative and quantitative insights, to help inform our direction. And I believe that product companies right now are creating their own internal design capabilities. And as a result, data is going to play a key role in that. So, companies that are looking at like data visualization is, I think, potentially a sweet spot for you. Companies like Tableau and Salesforce are using data, and they don't know how to take complex, ambiguous problems and turn them into easy to understand information. So this skill set is critical. And I think you've got a lot of opportunity. So don't underestimate yourself.
So just a quick question that I guess on behalf of everyone that's here, I think we're seeing a lot of what is a good example of a UX portfolio? We're talking about this ideal portfolio, but where can we find that? So either if you guys have your own portfolios that you've worked on, if you can share those or any examples that you can send in chat, I think that might be really helpful for people. And even back in the day or currently when you've been working on your portfolios, personally, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, or what are the learnings that you've gotten out of that if you have worked on your own in the past?
I can share a little bit because I feel like I'm in, in this process of like trying to like my portfolio from when I was a student, like that's being deactivated for, once I joined the industry. But like now I've been thinking about like, oh, I would like to bring that up. But I think before I even jump into that, I'm just taking a pause of like, okay, how do I want to brand myself? And like, why am I creating this portfolio? And like just being very intentional with that. And like, once again, Damon, really liked your analogy of like, this is my UX project. So like, who is my user like at the other end? Could it be other professionals? Could it be like, I love mentoring students. So, thinking about like what I can put in there that could be helpful for students. Could it be other unique opportunities? And, what is a story that I want to tell and I want people to walk away with? So I think before I even like jump into that, I know like I need to do like a brainstorming day of like for myself of like, hey, these are my things that I really value. These are the things that I would love to like chat to people about, outside of UX. Like there are other like things that, I'm always excited to chat about. And also, I have like my own point of view on like where the UX industry is going or UX research methods and kind of sharing some, pieces like that. So thinking very tactically, I'm like, how do I, and especially for like as a UX researcher, I'm just focused more so on getting the content down. So like, what's the simplest, like, tool that I can be using to put that there? Like I've thought about something as simple as like just having my own medium, is my portfolio where I just like write articles versus, going very heavy into like, web design. Cause it's just like, it takes more effort. So I'm trying to find that sweet spot that will just, help me get this done.
I guess maybe a piece of advice that I could jump in with as a person who kind of like, I came from a mechanical engineering background to an industrial design background, and then eventually ended up in the field working in service design, is that like when you have, a diverse background or you're switching fields, like make sure to put stuff in your portfolio that you enjoy doing and that you want to do in the future. Just because it's a good project, I wouldn't put it in if it's not something that you would want to do again, because people are going to expect that now that's why they hired you, is because you can do that. And so I always, when I see people with diverse portfolios, I always make a point of asking them in interviews, like, what are you really excited about and what do you want to do? Because I don't want to hire someone and then pigeonhole them into something that they hated that they put in their portfolio just because it looked cool.
Yeah, one thing to add to that, again, totally agreed, but it's the notion of eminence. So a portfolio is one thing, but there's other ways like writing Medium articles. My portfolio is currently defunct because I haven't updated in a while, and I'm having a hard enough time just keeping my damn LinkedIn profile up to date. But these are all part of the same. It's creating that that eminence of your portfolio, your personal work, and yeah, as Damon said, you got to be enthusiastic about the things that you want. And if you're going to do a good portfolio, interview yourself. As Aditi said, what do you value? What things do you care about? What things are you passionate about? Do a good skills inventory. Like there's no point pushing for something that you don't have the skills. You can grow into that. So you have to be realistic about what your objective is. But I think it starts like that. It is a UX project, as Damon said.
So now I have two quotes for the night. The first one was really powerful, but now interview yourself is my other takeaway for the evening. So I'm learning so much. I'm just like jotting all of these points down. Are there any other questions, Caitlin? Or
yeah, so we have, just for the sake of time, we'll just have one more question. Diana, I think, wanted to say their question out loud, so we'll let them speak.
So I'm starting my UX research job in next week, and I feel that I need to start my feel that I need to build my portfolio of the professional work experiences. And I was wondering, like, what are some things I need to keep in mind, and like some important notes I need to be taking and stuff, like thinking more strategically, knowing that any kind of project that I'm working on could could be a portfolio piece. Like, do you have any tips around that? Like, how do you guys build portfolio while you guys are working?
I would say like document. It's really easy. And I mean, for us as a company, so like, even though I'm not constantly updating my own portfolio, we're constantly writing case studies or trying to capture what it is that we did and share it with people. So to the extent that you can capture things, like once those moments are gone, it's very hard to go back and, you know, find that file or reproduce that stuff. So be quite intentional about capturing things, be really organized in terms of, you know, how you store files and stuff like that. Yeah, just make sure that you're gathering information, because you can always take time to, as we've said, like distill, share that with people, find out what's most powerful, but it's very challenging to go back to that moment and create something that you forgot to capture.
And I was going to add, for me personally, it's hard to write publicly about the case studies because a lot of the stuff is confidential, but the things that I can talk about are like UX processes or research methods. So actually like something that would be great, and I've always meaned to do this, but you know, it's hard to find the time. But when you're starting off, like reflect on you doing a certain method, like interviews, and like reflecting on like, oh, these are the things I would have done differently. These are like my top takeaways. So maybe some of like the meta questions around, oh, how could I have better communicated my like research findings, or like, this is my like journey to like learn a brand new method. How do you like engage with non-UX researchers to like understand the value of research? So I think there's like, maybe you could, you know, brainstorm these different topics and themes that are coming up as you get started out, and like think for yourself, or it's like, you know, someone who's just getting started off in UX research, like what would be valuable, and what is a perspective or unique reflection that you could you know, provide about that. But yeah, definitely document this and keep a note there, and you know, just have those drafts working.
Yeah, I can add one, only because I feel like I'm constantly reinforcing this message with my team at the very beginning of projects. And what I would say is make sure that you understand the objective and the problem at the very beginning, so that you're tracking towards those goals. And those goals come in the form of even potentially KPIs. Ask, what does success look like? And so once you understand what success looks like, then you can explain that later in the form of a case study, or in the form of that I've achieved this. So at the very beginning of the project, always ask, if you can, because KPIs are very challenging, but what does success look like, to simplify it? And then make sure that you're tracking towards that, and then you know you've achieved that at the end of the project.
Okay.
Actually, I have one more piece of advice, especially if you're you know, starting off in a new job. And something I try to do when joining a new team is like, as a UX researcher, like turn those skills on your teammates. Like try to like understand, you know, what are the challenges that they're facing? Like, have they worked with UX research before? You know, what are the research questions that keep them up at night? Communication style. So I think it's just like, yeah, really turn those skills on understanding your team members, because I think that's a huge part of like when you first start off, you know, in industry, like how do you work with, you know, these folks and work as a UX researcher with the different functions.
And don't forget to have fun. Like have fun at the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's important too.
Yeah.
So thanks to Anna for asking that question. We actually just had one more really quick one. If everyone has a minute or two. This is from Lamia. She asked, how important is your resume compared to your portfolio? So especially in this industry that we're in of UX, UXR, what is the relative importance of both of those?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I think they're companion pieces, really. Like, I almost like to see the resume reflect the portfolio and vice versa, because it's part of the same storytelling. So should be written in a similar fashion, should have the same narrative and storytelling. So if I see a resume that's dramatically different from the portfolio, I kind of go, is one of these dramatically out of date? I think the portfolio is really the most important, honestly. I think resume is table stakes to a certain extent. And I've often been misled by resumes, like when people put a lot of bullet points they may have superficial knowledge of some of the things they're talking about, but it's on a bullet point, whereas a portfolio shows evidence. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Were there any other thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think they go hand in hand. I think the resume and the text that you put in there kind of helps us do the like keyword search kind of thing. But then when you're really kind of assessing the candidates for the first screening, those two go hand in hand. They are just as important. And I just wanted to add to the previous points, or I mean, I think there's a lot of questions around NDA, and that's something that I struggled with as well. I think there are ways to protect the IP while still being able to showcase your thought process and your or thinking. And I've seen a lot of candidates do, password protect their projects. One red flag there though is like, if you can't get to the project right away, then you have to ask the candidate for the password, come back, and that takes a while. Like, it's not you, it's somebody else, like a recruiter reaching out and getting. So if you're gonna do password protect your portfolio, then make it easy to access or put it in your resume or in your application. And then, there are other ways like blurring out the important parts of your project in the images or company name, and making sure that the sensitive information is not being shared publicly.
Mm-hmm. I think, like, from my personal experience, I had a NDA project just before this job, was that I changed all the branding colors. So the client used like orange, for instance, but I changed it to like green, and got rid of all the company logos. As well, like, wrote all the like design processes, but I didn't really give much details about what the outcome was, or like the really important insights that are confidential. And then after writing the case study, I emailed back to my employer and asked them if this was okay to release to the public. And then the employer actually reviewed my case study, and they suggested some editings, and that was kind of minor thing, and then it was good to go. Yeah.
Yes, definitely get the legal department of your company to review it. Like, it's not, we can't use our intuition when it comes to intellectual property. And if some of these things are being submitted for invention disclosures, any disclosure basically invalidates a claim for an invention disclosure or a patent.
So just for the sake of time, Marilyn, just wanted to hand it back to you in case you had any final words before we wrap things up. And then we will open it back up for networking. If anyone wants to stick around, definitely feel free to. So Marilyn, take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you everyone for attending. I think this was a great conversation. I think there were some really key learnings. I was able to take away a couple of quotes personally, so thank you very much for that. But thank you, and thank you to the panelists for their time and their commitment and their knowledge. I hope everyone felt that they took away a lot from this session in terms of value and how you can build that ideal, solid portfolio. So thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, so the three of us, Kaylin, myself, and Anthony, also just wanted to say some quick thank yous to everyone who made this event possible. So of course, first of all, our panelists, thank you for allowing us to pick your brains for an hour and a half and just dive into all these insights. For our students, for everyone in the room, I think it was hugely beneficial just to hear from all your different perspectives and pulling from all your experiences. So Erin, Aditi, Damon, and Gord, thank you so much for everything. And then on top of that, of course, Marilyn, for facilitating such a wonderful discussion. The three of us are completely new to panels, so Marilyn actually was helping us even beforehand with planning and organizing this event, which was really, really helpful. So we appreciate her so much. And then finally, to the 3 students who were so brave to volunteer their portfolios, we actually received several portfolios, about 10 to 15. So to everyone who submitted and put themselves out there, you should really pat yourself on the back. It's scary, it's tough, but you did a great job. And to the 3 who were reviewed, or the 4 actually, thank you very, very much for volunteering to do that. So we'll be in touch with you guys soon. And finally, just for the 3 of us, we've been getting a lot of help throughout this project from Mark Chignall, Harumi Takeshita, and Ilona Posner. So these are the admin team members of Torchi. They've really been just guiding us and sitting with us in tons of meetings and, helping us the whole way. They've been our biggest cheerleaders. So we really appreciate all the support that we've gotten from them. So that's all the thank yous for the night, and everyone for coming. We hope you enjoyed the event. I think Kaylin just sent the survey feedback form again that we've been kind of spamming you to fill out. So before you head out for the night, if you could fill that out, that really helps us plan future events and know where we did well and what we can do better. So please do take 2 minutes to fill that out. And then I guess if anyone wants to stick around for some networking, talking about opportunities, talking to our panelists, I guess we can leave the room open until maybe 9 o'clock, and then we'll call it a night. So the floor is open.
Thank you, everyone. Thank